So I'm going to continue on with the rebuild of my Tekno EB48.4. On the last video you saw me get the front end onto the chassis, braces, drive shaft, and the center diff. These shocks have been rebuilt as well, and all of the hardware has been soaked in WD-40. So moving on to the rear, I have everything unassembled. I'm going to start out by getting the gearbox put together, and that will get me started taking apart the diff. Take this apart, drain out all the old fluid, and put in some new fluid. Alright, so I got the 4 screws out of the rear diff, and this shows you what lack of maintenance will do. This rear diff is pretty much empty. There's not a lot of fluid left. Whatever fluid is in there is just really dark and disgusting. The fluid starts out clear. Over time, over use, it gets darkened. This rear diff fluid is pretty much non-existent, and whatever's in there is black. So I got everything disassembled, and you can see the parts are just covered in a thick mud. It's just a black grease. This kind of shows you what happens when you don't take care of your RC. This car was running for about 8 months, and I did no maintenance to it. So really a lesson learned here as I run this car. I really got to keep a regular schedule of maintenance. Lucky for me, I don't see any damage. I don't see any stripped gears or anything, but I'm going to go through, clean everything up, and then I'll see what I'm working with. So I certainly got lucky on this one. No major damage. I don't see any teeth of the gears missing. Nothing like that. The biggest issue I'm going to have is the bearings. The bearings are a little beat up. Yeah, I could go through, clean them up, everything else, but I got the fast steady bearings, so I'll replace those and get this rear diff rebuilt. I also picked up a new rear diff gear case. This one isn't bad, but some of the holes were kind of bored out. And even though there wasn't really any major damage, just thought it'd be good to start out with a fresh one, like in the front. And here is the new diff case with the bearings installed. I'm going to go ahead and get this whole assembly back together. Alright, so my new diff case is together. Gonna go ahead and install it back into the gearbox. Alright, so flash forward a little bit, this is where I am. I got most of the rear assembly done, except for the shocks. This is pretty much ready to go back onto the chassis. Now the build was straightforward, I just followed the directions. There was nothing complicated here. The only issue I ran into was on the one side. I did lose the original nut, but I have extra parts all over, so I just went ahead and put a new nut on there. So now I can go ahead and get this back onto the chassis. Alright, so I got the rear on, the 5 screws at the bottom. There's 4 that actually hold on the rear. There's 1 screw up here that holds on this back brace. Alright, and the whole rear assembly is finished. I got the shocks on and everything is looking good. Everything sounds pretty smooth. I don't hear any major issues. I think I'm good to go ahead and get the electronics put back in. Skipping it further ahead, here it is. The final rebuild of the EB48.4. Everything seems to be working great. Everything went together real well. I did have to flip this center diff around. Stupid me, put it backwards. So I fixed that. We're in good shape here. The motor, ESC, everything is cleaned up. New solder joints. Got the servo, everything else hooked up real nice. And overall, it was a great, needed project. Remember that rear diff, completely empty. There was really no fluid in it. The front wasn't looking so good. The center diff was dirty, so I did get all that cleaned up. And it really just brings up the point of how important it is to maintain the RC. I did it off camera, but the shocks were completely empty for the most part. Whatever oil was in there was pretty dirty. The shocks now have all fresh oil. These old bearings just have a lot of crunch to them. They just do not sound good whatsoever. Yes, I could have taken them apart, cleaned them out, everything else, but it was just easier to go ahead, make the purchase, get the fast steady bearings. Saved me a lot of time, and it's well worth the money. The other thing I would recommend if you do something like this, a complete rebuild, is to go ahead and invest in some new screws. Found plenty of bent screws, so it's easier just to have some screws on hand. They're about $3 or $4. Check the manual, check out the part numbers, and get the correct sizes. For the wheels, I put back on the door tracks. These are a C2 Derringer wheel. I was trying these out to see how good they were, and they're pretty good on the track. When the track is loose, these things really grip in, and they performed pretty well. It was tough to really give a good review on them, though, because this car was in such bad shape. So now with the car rebuilt, I can really see how well these tires perform. I also went ahead and got the original EB48.4 wing. This is a little bit deeper down. This was the wing that came with the EB48.4, so I got a new one of these for this rebuild. The other thing I picked up was a new sensor wire. These sensor wires get worn out over time, and they make the motor not react right when you're trying to control the throttle. So it's easier to make sure you pick up a new sensor cable. The last thing I did was I picked up a new body. This is TKR 8245. I'll get this body all painted up, get this car out onto the track, and really see how it does. I really think I got lucky. There was a few things that could have really went wrong as far as the internal gears, things like that. But luckily things held up. These Teknos are built tough. They take a beating and they keep coming back. But even still, make sure you keep up with your maintenance.